we'll go ahead and get started. Oh, I don't like that. Good morning. Thank you for coming to Multicultural Perspectives of Trauma this morning. Our guest this morning is Dr. James Wilson. Dr. Wilson has more than 35 years in the behavioral healthcare field, beginning as a Navy corpsman, progressing through to now. He possesses knowledge and understanding of current behavioral models and strategies aimed at empowering people to improve their quality of life. Dr. Wilson has a BA in psychology, a Master's of Arts in professional counseling, and a doctorate in behavioral health from ASU. So that I say welcome, Dr. Wilson, and go Cats. Sorry, I'll leave it at that.
My daughter went to U of A as well. So with that, good morning. Just to warn you, everything I do, I'll call on the people in the back row first. So thank you for sitting back there. I appreciate it. Yes, that's you. Okay. So if you sat up front, you're safe. Okay. With that. Well, welcome this morning. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about multicultural perspectives on trauma and treatment. Just a little correction with the bio. Actually, I've been in behavioral health for more than 40 years at this point. So I started when I was 10 years old. Okay. For most of you, I was just sharing, and I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. Elizabeth. I was just sharing with Elizabeth that I have a couple of sons that are 2 years older than her, and that's hard for me to believe at this point. Yeah, she's young looking. So what I like to do, to get started, and I have a clicker. So I walk around. I don't know about you, but I'm good probably sitting for max 40 minutes before I start leaning out the chair and start nodding to things that people aren't saying, that kind of thing. So if you need to get up and use the bathroom, you're welcome. But probably about 40, 45 minutes, I'll try and remember, I'll break us so you're able to get a break, get up, stretch your legs, do that. Okay, so I do a lot of work with different agencies. I also teach at university level. I work with graduate students. I taught at the doctoral level and community colleges as well. And I do a lot of work with Arizona Trauma Institute and Dr. Bob Roten. I've known him for about 20 years. So first of all, I'd like to start with just who you are, if I can briefly just find out a little bit about you and why are you taking this? Is it mandatory or is there something specific you want to get out of it? And it's okay if it's mandatory. So if I can start, I'll just start. In fact, I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth, and then we'll just work right back. So just who are you? So I can understand just a little bit about you and how I might be able to. I'm looking for you. Okay. Yes. Who do you do? Exactly. Yeah. Just a little bit about you. Why what your job is essentially, and what you hope to get away from this training and take away.
I am the executive office receptionist.
Okay.
Here, and outside of this building, I am a Sunday school teacher.
Oh, okay.
I am also a minister.
Okay.
I have 5 children. I've been married for December, it will be 19 years.
Yeah.
My oldest is 18. She's attending Grand University.
Okay.
I love church. I love God.
Okay. Okay. And what do you hope to take away from this training?
I was just curious as far as what.
Okay.
Because, I live in South Phoenix, and just I've been in South Phoenix.
Just asking everybody in the room who they are and what they hope to get out of this training.
Oh my God! How many people live here?
I don't know, and we can't hear any.
Okay.
See everybody in their own little place, respective place.
Okay.
And how to respect that place and that.
Okay. Yes, you can put it that way. Okay, thank you. Got that. Okay, so trauma, a little bit about that. So I'm going to jump back and Amy?
I'm Amy, and I'm the Advocate Program Manager in the Criminal Division, so I oversee the advocates who are providing direct services to crime victims.
Okay.
And it's been a long time, even though I don't have a caseload of my own anymore, it's always, of course, that's not new, and working with people going through victimization
Yes.
and trauma.
Okay, thank you. Next, please.
I'm Kirsten Flores, I'm the Director of the Office of
Okay.
Criminal Services.
Hello, Kirsten.
Middle section in the Criminal Division.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Makes sense. That's important. I'm going to jump right there. Okay.
I'm an advocate assistant. So basically, it's one of the line where phone calls come through, so it's important to understand victims going through trauma. I also worked in SMI.
Okay, with SMI population?
Yes, I did in with the Department of Behavioral Health Services.
Yes. Okay.
So it's changed from since I left now.
Okay. Welcome. So, perfect timing. Okay. I'm asking you to introduce yourself. Just say a little bit about you and what you hope to take away from the training. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Is just kind of a deeper understanding of how culture affects how
Okay.
what culture means to
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Next.
My name is Evelyn Robles. I'm a victim advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Here.
Okay.
I hope to, it's kind of interesting to see how, if anything's progressed, and how different cultures use trauma. I know last night we were taking courses that
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see what else is going
Okay. All right. Pleasure. Next, please.
My name is Erica Lamb, and I'm also an advocate.
Okay. All right. Pleasure to meet you. And then it's right behind you. Yes. Okay. Mhm. Congratulations. Yeah. That's great. Did she? Oh, she was probably 7. Okay.
Directly at the office, but when I saw the advertisement immediately, I thought it sounded very interesting.
Okay.
And I thought anything that helps me understand more and process information and see it in perspective is helpful. That's why I'm here.
Okay. Great. Welcome. Next, please.
My name is Regina Rodriguez. I
Uh-huh.
used to be an advocate. Now I'm an escape rights trainer.
Oh.
So I
Okay.
still find this
Okay. Excellent. Please. Next. Okay. I love that when you have interns involved. Yeah, you're creating a culture. I love that. Next, please.
My name is Alex. I am another victims' rights trainer with the Office of Victim Services. I used to be an advocate as well,
Okay.
so I carry that sort of passion for awareness and interaction with all people from all backgrounds and needs. So I think that regardless of whether I use it with direct service now, it's still so important to be culturally aware in every circumstance that any of it.
Indeed. Thank you. At that, we're going to jump across the aisle and. Uh-huh.
I have taken this really
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Next, please. All right. Mhm. Okay. Thank you. And then next, please. Excuse me, let me ask. I'm not familiar with your acronyms. What does that stand for? Oh, okay. Just want to know. Okay. Mhm. Definitely.
Now I'm in health civil prosecution, but
Uh-huh. I can imagine. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Frankie, if I may ask just a little bit of your background, what's your ethnicity or background?
I believe I'm majority
Korean?
Korean.
Okay.
A single dad, Korean, raised me.
Okay.
My mother,
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's great reason, I believe, for doing this. We're going to move up to the table to you, sir.
Brandon Lewis, I'm a fraud investigator in the Consumer Fraud Group.
Okay.
Consumer Protection Advocacy Section office. My background, I've 15 years doing criminal investigation in the fraud realm. Most of the time is on behalf of the government, where the government's the victim or business is the victim. Since I came here to the Attorney General's office a year and a half ago in working consumer fraud, I've really gotten into seeing these consumer frauds and how they affect victims, individuals, particularly a lot of these phone scams.
Yeah. Yeah. Seniors get hit by that a lot. Yeah.
And just in building these complaints and responding to them, seeing how certain segments of society seem to be a little more susceptible to these scams. So that's one of the reasons I want to get a better understanding on the whole victim side of things and how culture affects that. And my wife's working on a master's degree in social work. This will make for some interesting discussions over dinner.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You can challenge her about what you need to. Please, we're going to move up to you, ma'am. Okay. Excellent. I love that. Uh-huh. Yeah, I love that. I have a background also in family mediation and conflict resolution, so I appreciate that, what you're doing with that. Next, sir.
Rod Pollock in the environmental enforcement section.
Okay.
Limited effect for that, but I saw the topic sounded interesting, and I worked with foster family support groups,
Okay.
nonprofit groups,
Okay.
and a lot of conflict,
Yeah.
a lot of trauma that comes out of those situations.
Yeah. And you,
It's all multicultural. So.
yes, and Brad, you'd be surprised. Environment is critical. So there's relevance there, believe it or not. Sir, we'll move up to you.
I'm Jeff Cantrell. I'm
Okay.
an attorney doing environmental enforcement. The reason why
Okay.
I'm here is because I attended the previous workshop a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, and it was one of the best workshops or seminars I've had in decades.
With Dr. Roten?
Yes.
Okay.
It was
Yeah,
just
it would be
outstanding.
excellent. Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the work I do, but I'm a lifelong student of martial arts and patterns in psychology and aggression, so it's just, it fit right in.
Oh, this is
But-
perfect then.
but,
What do you study?
Pardon me?
What martial arts do you study?
I started out with mostly Chinese stuff.
Okay, a lot of
back in the
different
70s.
stuff. Uh-huh.
And then got into combativs, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Psychology of aggression, Lieutenant Colonel Grossman and so forth.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of those studies.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it kind of fits in. But like I say, I was really impressed, so I'm hoping that this will be the same league I have every
Well,
expectation.
we'll share some stuff. We'll touch on some same things. If you're in his, we'll touch on some of that. So I saw a couple more people come in. So before I get you, I just want to be able to get the person who's on video, if you would just say hello, introduce yourself just briefly, and what you hope to take away from the training.
I'm Ashton. I work in
Oh,
victim
we can't hear?
services.
Oh, you can. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, so just pantomime. Okay. Okay. I got you. Thank you, though. Thank you.
That's Ashton. She is an advocate
Okay.
for services, but she's working within with our agents.
Okay.
She's working with victims during the investigation. She has a lot of elder exploitation cases.
Okay, excellent. Okay, got you at that. I saw a couple people come in right there in the green shirt. Hi. Uh-huh.
I've always had an interest in psychology.
Okay. Yeah. Easy peasy. Just pay them. You want to do what you want. That. Ma'am, please. Uh-huh.
General's office, and sort of the same type of thing. I'm just interested in this particular issue.
Okay.
I've done a lot of diversity training.
Training.
Type of thing, and just very much concerned about where our country is going.
Okay.
Thinking about these issues.
Good. Well, welcome to all of you. 3 hours, you can't do justice to either trauma or to diversity or multicultural issues. So I will try my best to hopefully share something and provide you something relevant that will be helpful for you if you're doing that. Just a little bit more of a background. I actually bidded and won an RFP for the state to be a grievance and appeals investigator back in 1999, I think it was, et cetera. So I had a chance to investigate a lot of cases involving people with serious mental illness and the kind of problems, everything from mortality cases to simply rights violations in that sense. So I can appreciate the work you do and the importance of it and the impact of it with that. One of the things that sometimes doesn't happen with regard to trauma is that the members of that organization who are on the front line many times don't really understand how they can support people who've been traumatized. And many times the organization itself may not have policies or procedures that are kind of trauma-friendly, that will allow people to support people in ways that are effective. And so we see sometimes with case managers who are on the front line of providing services to people with serious mental illness, they get burnt out, right? Because they have all the responsibility but no authority. I can't make a decision. I really can't seem to impact people's lives. And sometimes they don't understand trauma as well and the impact on them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let me go through some foundation building initially. Cultural competence in the addressing framework. You have in your handout a handout, and I may have slides that aren't in your handout with that because when I submitted that quickly, I was in transition, busy. I had a brother who had just passed away, so I was busy doing other things, and I realized I submitted a slide, and I wanted to submit this slide instead. So you're going to see a few slides here you don't have. And Amy, you're welcome if you'll get with Lucy and let her know. I'll give her these, and she can print these out, and if you would like these, you'll be able to have these as well. Okay, so what is culture? Okay. It's defined by the community of society. Culture, of course, is the way people view the world. And this is general, and I'm not going to read all this to you. I'll let you read this. But essentially, it's a collection. You have a culture in your office, right? Do you remember the first time that you came into your own particular sphere, your group, your office? What did you have to learn to be able to feel comfortable and for other people to feel comfortable with you and to understand what was happening in that environment? Castro in 1998 identified the elements, and he agreed that a culture is a common heritage and history that is passed from one generation to the next. You see that with every culture, unless it's been disrupted. Just a brief definition of what multicultural awareness is. Multicultural awareness is understanding, sensitivity, appreciation of the history and values, culture, religion, pretty much everything about a group of people or an individual. You're welcome to ask questions at any time, but this is really just kind of stuff to just set the stage a little bit. Cultural competence has 5 basic elements, and I have a real sense, just based on what all of you are saying, that you really would like your organization to be culturally competent, to be trauma-informed as well about this. So one of the things is you have to value diversity, and I heard that in your remarks, that you're interested in understanding much broader what's happening with other people, in addition to yourself. Self-assessment. Now, that's the hard part. Because as human beings, we all have blind spots. There's something that you don't see because of a bias you aren't aware of, or a tendency you may not have. Pay much attention to. And then manage the dynamics of differences. You're doing that. You look like a very diverse group in terms of age, mostly women, but there are a few men here, so you're looking in terms of gender. Okay, so you seem to have experience with that. Institutionalizing cultural knowledge. And hopefully these trainings will begin to give you the kind of information and background you can do that. You can begin to institutionalize some of this stuff. Okay. Make adaptations to policies, service delivery structures, attitudes, and behaviors. That is the long-term kind of involvement because typically if change happens in an organization, it's from the top down. They begin to model that culture and that change for people. Any questions about this? Yes. I put this in, and you don't have this in yours, because I believe that anyone who's working with various cultures needs to be able to understand how to work with people who are in desperate circumstances or feeling really they're at the end, they're hopeless, etc. And one of the instruments that we use frequently in working with individuals, and this is a very good instrument, it's called the Cultural Assessment of Risk for Suicide. You're not therapists, so I'm not going to give you the therapist spiel on all of this, but I wanted you to be aware that there are instruments specifically that assess suicide risk for individuals of different cultures. This has been looked at and compared with the Beck depression inventory, suicide items, hopelessness scales, and some suicide ideation scales. And what that's getting to essentially is that we have to really norm this stuff. We have to go out and test it. It really needs to be validated and seen as reliable. And this is one instrument that is. Just a little bit on how culture affects suicide risks. Here's what some of the literature says. Rates vary across gender, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Suicide rates traditionally are highest among white males in our society, lowest among non-immigrant black females or African American females. Suicide rates are growing quickly among non-immigrant black adolescent males. And then suicide rates among older adults is highest in Asian males. And suicide rate among Latino adolescents, also in LGBTQ young men specifically, is trending upward as well. So. How culture affects suicidal risk. You talked about it being difficult, Frankie, I think, to get people to really testify and talk about things. The same thing around the issue of suicide. There's so much stigma and shame attached to suicide that people literally just hide from it. They don't want to talk about it. But they're impacted by the trauma of that event. They carry it with them. Assessing a family conflict may be particularly important if you're looking at suicide risk for individuals from interdependent cultures like Asian, Hispanic cultures which are considered to be collective cultures. Research shows for the LBGT individuals often turn to the community when they're disowned by the family or they aren't accepted by the family. They create a family in the community among their peers, and that's who they rely on for support. Okay. Well, some of this may not seem relevant to you, but here's the thing. This is a challenge for you. I have to be careful when I'm walking. He says the camera catches me, but I'm a walker. I don't start doing this. This is Project Implicit. Anybody ever hear this? Not familiar? Okay. So this is something for you to do. This is a study that's been conducted by Harvard University. And what it does, it assesses your conscious and unconscious preference for over 90 different topics ranging from everything political issues, ethnic groups, to sports teams, your entertainment style. At the same time, there are these mini assessments. It takes about 10 to 12 minutes, okay, to do that. And I'm giving this information to you, and I'll send this over to you, Amy, in this slide if someone's interested in doing this. There is involved a consent agreement. This is an actual study, so if you take it, you'll find this page once you link into it that will provide you information, contact information of who's conducting the study, any questions you might have with this. There's nothing mandatory about this. You can start this and stop it at any time. But the information is, I think, insightful for individuals if they take this study. So I wanted to share that with you and make sure you're aware of that. Okay. So I just covered a lot quickly, just briefly, just trying to set the stage. What I'd like to talk about is a model or a framework, the addressing framework. It's used, it's a social construction kind of model, and it's used to understand how do we engage people from this diversity, this universe where we have so many differences. Anybody here ever been to Africa? Had a chance to travel through Africa. Went through Africa. What was one of the things that you noticed in terms of the population there? Anything stand out for you?
Well, for me, it was more the culture shock came from just how,
Mm-hmm.
because I worked with a really poor population.
Okay.
I worked with all the children.
What country were you in? Just
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe. Okay. Good.
And it was how much, how happy they were with making the best, like they made the best of what they had. It was the biggest one, especially because I worked with kids every day. So I was, they were just happy kids in general. And you just sit there like, how are you not, more freaked out over your situation? This is daily living.
Uh-huh. That's right. You may not know the difference. There's an interesting term. It's called Ubuntu. Ubuntu. And it's a concept. There was a experiment done by a gentleman who was visiting with a group of people, and the kids were essentially living in an environment that was pretty much like that. It was very challenging. And he wanted to find out how they dealt with competition in their world. How did they deal with conflict and competition? And so he decided that what he would do would get this basket of fruit as incentive. And he was trying to set up, okay, we're going to set up a game so that you can win this basket of fruit, whoever wins it. And so what he did was to put this basket of fruit a ways from the group of kids, and he told them, look, the first one to the fruit gets first choice. You can pick the second one, so forth, so forth. So you're going to race to this. So he lined the kids up, right, and he told them, you're going to race. Basket of fruit down there. And so he had them start up, and he said, ready, set, go. Right? And the kids just stood there for a moment. And they were looking at each other. He said, wait a minute, I don't think you understand what I'm asking you to do. I want you to race down there, and if you get down there first, you get first choice. Right? This is about competition. Okay, and so the kids are looking, and the adults are looking, and they're shaking their head. They say, okay, yeah, we got you. You want us to run down there to the basket? Okay, yeah. He says, that's exactly it. Okay, ready? He said, ready, set, go. Okay, and then all the kids grabbed each other's arm, and they started running together. They ran down to the basket. He said, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted. I wanted you to compete. Welcome. Glad you're here. Okay, wanted you to compete. So I need each of you. He said, oh, you want to see who's faster? Okay, sure. So they lined up again, said, ready, set, go. They took off, right? The kids, they ran separately. They weren't holding this time. So the first kid down there, though, when he gets down there, he just sits down. Okay, next kid sit down, and they all decide to sit down in a circle. And he said, well, you won, you have the first choice. And the kid said, well, I made my choice. He says, what? He says, I'm sharing with everybody. And their philosophy was that they shared everything together. So if you won, I won. Right? We do that with respect to how we are in our emotional relationships. If someone we love suffers, what do? We suffer with them. We feel that pain. And someone succeeds, we rejoice in that success as well. But that was their philosophy, and that's part of what happens sometimes in cultures where there's not a lot, right? When it's a different mentality. That's a collectivistic perspective versus an individual perspective that we have here in America, where everything is competition, right? I'm sure if I encountered you on the street in your vehicle that you would not be nice to me. Okay. You might let me get in, you might not, right? Okay. Depending. Personalities change in that way with that. So just wanted to make you aware of this. But this framework that I want to just share with you is a way to kind of understand the complexity of diversity. And so I'm going to just kind of walk through this a little bit with you. And if you have questions, please ask those questions. So just back, it's the addressing framework. That's the acronym that we're going to be breaking down. What does all that mean? The A stands for age and generational influences, right? People are not simply the age they are. Age in context of personal, cultural, world history. How many baby boomers here? Okay. Anybody here from the greatest generation, as they used to call it? Anybody? World War II? Anybody here from the silent generation? Depression? Okay. Very different. How many Generation Xers? Generation, okay. Millennials? Okay, etc. You can see just the diversity in that. People are situated in their age cohort, right? What does it mean to be you at this point in your life? And if you're working with people, despite wherever they're from, what does it mean to be them? That's one of the questions. Age and generational influences. Answering these questions requires a knowledge of history, Pacific culture, larger picture of the world. Just a question, how many people know how many Native American tribes are here in the Valley? Yeah, I mean in the state. Let's put state. Not in the Valley. I'll say the Valley. No. That's a pretty good guess. How many? Anybody else? That's a pretty good guess. About the same? Okay, you're in the ballpark, about 23, depending. There are a couple of tribes, Pima, Maricopas, that kind of combine and they get lost in. How many federally registered Native American tribes are there? Just sure. How many? Go ahead.
I would guess a couple, 250, I'll throw that out.
250? That's a little bit low.
I was gonna say like 335.
That's still low. No, well, actually there might be, but there are actually officially 537 registered, 36, 37 registered, but there are many who haven't been recognized officially yet. Very small tribes, people who are applying for it still. And it's important in terms of cultural knowledge here, the largest tribe that we encounter are Navajos, the largest group of people that we encounter. An interesting fact about Navajos, if you didn't know this, is when we had the solar eclipse, okay, she already knows. Perfect, I love that, yeah. That really is a sacred time. That really is a very special event for Navajos, and many times they don't come outside, they stay in, okay, and there are ceremonies that take place. So one of the issues may be that if you're waiting for somebody to show up to testify, to provide you with information, or therapists are waiting for someone to make an appointment, they don't make that appointment. And of course the reflex is to stigmatize the person, right? they got a problem. Yes, ma'am.
Actually had a holiday on Monday.
A holiday, that's what they, yeah, typically. Shuts down, people stay home, or they do a ceremony. Excellent, okay. Developmental and acquired disabilities. Some people are born, some people are born with disabilities, developmental, and some people lose their temporary able bodies during the life acquired. Being a person with a disability means different things depending on whether it's developmental or acquired. Okay. The cultural, social, and history context in which the person lives. Right. Well, I was in the military, and there were, as you can imagine, a lot of strapping young men, strong people, right? People very physical. And when people got injured or lost the ability to kind of present and project that physicality, it really impacted them severely. And there were people that I've known, I've worked with, who've been born with disabilities who really don't see it as a disability. They talk about ableism. I'm able, not disabled in that respect. The politics of disability during the person's lifetime, because you're dealing with the law, are you familiar with the ADA, Americans with Disability Act? Are you familiar with the ADAA? Yeah, ADAA. Okay. Americans Disability Act amendment that was passed officially went into effect 2009. That had a huge impact with regard to trauma when we talk about trauma, because what that did for the first time for people who were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, it allowed for them to be considered disabled, because some disabilities are invisible, like mental illness or et cetera, may have that, but it allowed them to begin to be disabled without having to prove it before that, because people who had PTSD couldn't get benefits. Right? If you're in the military, you could. Soldiers could get some degree of disability, right, recognized. But if you're in civilian life and you're suffering with PTSD, it was almost impossible. Okay. And I'll say a little bit more about that as we go forward. Impact of disability function, visible, invisible, example, physical disability and mental health. Disabilities, a language piece. Speak of a person with a disability. The person is not disabled, kind of the semantics of talking about that issue. Something to think about, is being deaf a disability status or a linguistic minority status? Is deaf a culture, or is it a disability? A culture. Why would you say that? It is, and it's a culture depending on the country and all. Yes, Frankie. Why can't it be both? Mm-hmm. 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 Part of what this is about is defining who you are as well, self-definition at some level with this, and being able to have access to resources, of course, in the community that will help you live a quality life. Many deaf people don't want to be seen as someone who is one down or a disability in that respect. They do see it as a culture. Not everyone. There are many people who are born with hearing impairments or develop hearing impairments, become deaf later, and they don't have a connection to a support system or resources. And for that person, it really does become important that they're able to be seen as someone with a disability so that they can get disability benefits. But there are many people who are deaf who don't believe that.
I noticed recently, because we keep
for the federally grant funded. And it used to be that we would classify if someone was a disability. And in 2015, the feds came out with new classifications. Like we started like tracking people who identified as multiple races or other sex or gender and whatnot. And in those special classifications, they took hearing impaired out.
Good.
And it's its own category, separate from the physical or cognitive mental disabilities.
Got you. Right, that was lunch.
That's the first time I saw that.
Yeah. I guess most people, depending on your generation, when you grew up, you kind of associated hearing impairment or those kind of developmental issues with Helen Keller, okay, who basically was shut down, at least in terms of her senses, but she could feel with that and decided she's a brilliant woman, very insightful. Something to think about. My experience, the way that I became conscious that there was a deaf culture and aware of that was I used to work in a substance abuse residential program when I was first getting started years back. And one of the tasks I had was to complete intakes on people coming into the program. And so I had a gentleman I was doing the intake with. Right? And if you're like me, which most people I hope are at some level, I was on automatic pilot because I had this kind of whole list of things I needed to get through, and I had only so much time to get through it. So I was trying to be efficient. I was kind of going through and had my list. And so the person sat down, and I would ask a question, and the person would give me the appropriate kind of body language response. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So I was going through, asking these questions, right? And I'm thinking, whoa, this is easy. This is going to go really fast, going through. It took me 20 minutes to realize the person was deaf. They could read lips a little bit, but they basically could read body language, and they knew the rhythm. So it's kind of like, oh. Right. So I had to back up and get an interpreter, get someone who could really interpret for this person so he could understand what was going on. But it was a lesson for me many times that who we project, who we think we see is not necessarily who that person is or how they define themselves, always. Religion and spirituality is important, right? What is the place of religion and spirituality in a person's life? If we're looking at understanding someone who's different from us, right? For some people, religious beliefs also create a culture. We see that with Jehovah's Witnesses, with Islam, Roman Catholicism. Religious and political systems are merge in that sense. Does a person belong to a minority religion? I've worked with people who have been, you ever hear of Jains from India? Yeah. That, which is minority religion, small religion, different denominations. Is religion or spiritual practice important in a person's identity? If you're working with someone, that's one of the questions sometimes that doesn't get asked frequently by behavioral health professionals as well as by others. Do you have a spiritual life? What's important to you? How do you sustain yourself through tribulation or through trials that you're going through? How has the person's life or experience and upbringing been shaped by their specific beliefs? Did you go to Sunday school every Sunday, or did you go to church 3 times a week? Depending on what you were. Did you never go to church? Did you have to memorize a particular religious text? Ethnicity and identity. Ethnicity may include race, such as African American, Latino, Asian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, Native Alaskan, Native Hawaiian. People of self-identified mixed racial heritage. Remember, race is a social construct, and that sometimes gets people at the level of genetics. There's really no difference, appreciably. But you're right, one of the things, there are people who are redefining themselves and saying, well, I don't fall clearly in anyone's category. I'm mixed. White ethnicity, of course, typically WASP, Irish, Italian, Armenians, and et cetera, Americans. Okay. Race is a social construct, and I just want to make that point. People of different racial groups are indistinguishable at the level of genes. Just a little history. It was an arbitrary classification of populations conceived in Europe using actual or assumed genetic traits to classify populations of the world into a hierarchical order, with Europeans being superior to all others. This was Christensen in 1989. Socioeconomic status. This is an invisible variable because you could be born in one socioeconomic status, and as you get older, you can find yourself in the other. How many people were born rich and became poor, or were born poor, moved to middle class, lower middle class, whatever it may be? A person has both a social class of origin and then they have one they currently occupy. Okay, and that's true of people who are, for instance, if you're getting people who are immigrating to the country because of war or other things, you may be getting people who are doctors, who are in other kind of class, and they get here, but of course they can't practice, they can't do that, so they move to class, and that can be problematic. That's a traumatic impact for many people. People who change social class may hide their origins, right? Social class may be a combination of money, education, attitudes, values, larger social context, and okay, the context in which class is defined, and that's my idea of someone who grabs the money and run. Okay, once you get it, if you can make it. The person who won the Powerball did that, yeah, literally. So, yeah. Sexual orientation. Everyone has one. An orientation is a direction of desires, not a lifestyle. It's kind of the focus of a person's desire. Men's orientations tend to be more fixed and stable, and women's tend to be more fluid. Any questions? I mean, I'm just kind of going through this, and this is just kind of data, but questions, comments? Okay. Sexuality, people express their orientation in various configurations. Monogamous, polygamous, celibate. The new stigmatized sexual minority by mainstream LGBTQ. Everyone know what those acronyms stand for? Yes? Pretty much? Questioning. That one. Okay. Right, there's a new stigmatized, the intersex people, a third sex, but that's kind of going away. You're familiar with CIS? CIS? Okay, and some of those, okay. And the CIS prefix versus his or her, cis means that you identify with the gender you're born with, either female or male in that respect. And then a third sex, just third sex versus just two, male and female. And then practitioners of kink was interesting. And when I say kink, do you have an idea of what that is? Kinda, maybe. Kinky, right? Okay. S&M, bondage, etc. Right. That. They tend to be the ones who. There are people. There's a movement to see that as a legitimate sexual orientation. Okay. Indigenous heritage, North America, right? Territories. Understanding how people have been impacted by oppression and colonization. With many of the Native American groups, if you're working with individuals from there, I guess I should ask this question. Do you think the majority of Native Americans live on reservations or are they in urban areas? Just to give you that kind of briefness. What do you think? 50-50? Okay. You're splitting the difference. That's okay. Mostly urban. He's absolutely correct. Vast majority of many people on reservations don't live on the reservations, Native Americans. They live off. They do go back to the reservation if they're getting services or they connect with the Native American hospital, the Indian hospital. National origin, where someone comes from and how their family got to the U.S. On purpose. Did you immigrate in fear? Were you trying to escape being killed, war, right? Deprivation or famine? In chains, legal or undocumented, when someone's family came here, the timing around that, in relationship with what attitudes toward their particular immigrant group, When you came, were you welcome or were you basically attacked? Stigmatized for coming. National origin issues. How long ago did someone come over, their significant other, family come here? Children and grandchildren of immigrants or refugees may have different relationships to their country of origin. How many people are second or third generation here, have parents who came? Do you notice the contrast between how they feel about the country versus how you may feel about it? Okay, with that, many times the values and the old traditions aren't necessarily as important to more recent generations with that. Is there anything, when you think about this, is there anything that your parents or grandparents want you to continue to do to uphold a tradition that necessarily you say, well, I don't know if that's all that important to me? Mm-hmm.
Well, in Mexico, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Not in Mexico.
Okay.
First of all, so it's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in Mexico, well, actually one of the big ones, Mexico by 27, if you're not married, like you're never getting married.
That's right, yeah. You're a
You
spinster.
turned 27 this year. Where's the
Uh-huh.
husband? And I'm like, I don't care, really. Out there, maybe. I don't know. I'm not worried.
Gotcha.
And she's like, no, you're 27. You're old. You're going to stay single for life.
And that's not uncommon, that kind of conflict. It can create problems. Sometimes people are able to work through it, but many times it creates some strain in the family. Gender. Gender is the initial and one of the most powerful organizing, if you will, organizers of human identity. Challenging issues, right? This is what people feel they are in that sense. Gender, in all its variation, intersex, that's someone who may have both. The old term for that used to be someone who was a hermaphrodite. That was an old term that isn't used, but someone who may have both sexual or genitalia. Okay, sometimes fully developed, sometimes not, partially. It can be one or the other. Challenging and binary notions of sex and gender. Gender is not the same as biological sex. A little more definition. Sex is the body, that's your biology that you're born with, male, female, or intersex. Gender is how does a person enact a relationship to the body, and in biology. Gender is a social construct, and it changes with the other variables in this model. You see people who may cross-dress, or people who do a thing, and I forget the term for it, where they're dressed both like a boy and a girl simultaneously. They'll have on clothing that's mixed. You say, is that a boy or a girl? And not really androgynous. There's a particular term used for it, movement. But yes, kind of like that though. Yes, in that ballpark. These are the assumptions of this model. And I want to share the model because I just want to give you a sense of kind of what people begin to look at and what you might want to be mindful of in working with various individuals. People do not have one identity, right? Instead, our identity is constructed of various factors, multiple identities. Aspects of identity have different salience in different social contexts. Right? It's a different thing for me when I'm hanging out with men to be a man than when I'm in a room, when I'm hanging out with my wife or my mother-in-law and her 10 sisters. Right? It's a very different thing. Yeah, it is. A very different dynamic. Okay. Observers will construct a person's identity differently than the person construct themselves. People see you differently than you sometimes see yourself. You know. And that's a number of different ways. People misread a number of things about you. An example of the complexity of identity construction. Here's one. A person is white-skinned, raised Methodist, now no affiliation, bisexual, monogamous, has multiple sclerosis, male, upper middle class currently, raised working class, native English speaker, 40 years old, has a law degree. That is a diverse kind of sense of self in talking to a person. But what we tend to do, at least in behavioral health and sometimes just in the way that we work with people, is we tend to kind of put people in boxes. You're this, and then we deal with you based on that particular label. Okay. Why don't we take a break? Guys, I held you here for an hour. Take a quickie, and then we'll come back to this. And we'll get into some of the trauma stuff and physiology. Break the break. What do you need? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? 10? Okay. 10. Okay. You know, what it was interesting. One of the things about Terry, I grew up too. I did a lot of martial arts.